Hi, I'm Brother Jake, and in response to all these people walking around saying that Mormons are racist, I just wanted to set the record straight. Mormonism is not racist. Let me explain. The thing is, God is no respecter of persons, which means that he loves everybody equally regardless of race and wants everyone to be saved. Now, that being said, there was a small period of time when black men weren't allowed to hold the priesthood, and since the priesthood is the authority of God, that meant they couldn't do stuff like baptize people or give priesthood blessings or watch over a congregation or be part of the administrative body of the church. And since it's also necessary to have the priesthood to do temple stuff, the fact that they couldn't hold the priesthood also kind of meant that they couldn't get married in the temple, so their families wouldn't be together after they died, and they weren't going to be able to get into super VIP heaven and do cool God stuff. Now, before you say that's racist, let me tell you about the perfectly reasonable explanation that past prophets and apostles have given for why black people couldn't hold the priesthood. I mean, if anyone knows the reason to be them, right? They're the mouthpiece of God, for crying out loud. Anyway, here it is. You see, back before any of us were born, we lived with God, and he came up with this plan where we were going to come to earth and get tested so we could prove we're good and get into super VIP heaven. But Satan was there, and he was like, that plan sucks, we should totally do my plan. And God was like, no way, and then there was a big war in heaven. Well, it wasn't really a war with weapons where you kill people, it was a war of words where everyone was arguing, like a giant Festivus. So Satan and all the people who followed him lost and got kicked out of heaven, and they're the evil spirits that tempt us while we're alive. Everyone else was on God's side and got to be born on earth. But here's the thing, during that whole war, not everyone fought equally as hard. Sure, you had a lot of people that were total ninjas, but you also had people that were just kind of loafing around, not going all out, being lazy. So the idea is that all the people that didn't try their hardest to give Satan the smackdown in that premortal war were born, and that's why they couldn't have the priesthood. So it wasn't really unfair, because it was all based on something they did before they were born. Maybe you don't remember doing it because at birth there's this veil of forgetfulness that's put over our minds, so we can't remember anything that happened in our premortal life, because if we could, following God would be too easy. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Now, some people might be saying, whoa, that's really racist. And now that I'm saying it, it kind of sounds that way. But the great thing is that the entire explanation it just gave, the one given by past prophets and apostles, isn't really the official church stance anyway. Because God revealed through a more recent prophet that banning black people from having the priesthood was wrong and we shouldn't do it anymore. Well, I don't know if wrong is the best word, since the guys who put the policy in place and explained why it was there were prophets and apostles, and God would never let a prophet lead the church down the wrong path, he would zap him first. So since those guys were definitely called of God and none of them got hit by lightning or anything, it wasn't technically wrong, it just wasn't doctrinal. I mean, I guess it was doctrinal in the sense that the people who said it were specifically called to be the living mouthpieces of God on the earth, and it was doctrinal in the sense that when they said it, it was taught and interpreted as God's will at the time and never recanted, and I guess it was doctrinal in the sense that it kinda dictated church policy for over 100 years and prevented hundreds of thousands of otherwise worthy black males from baptizing people or blessing people or being sealed to their families in the temple. But the thing to remember is that banning black people from having the priesthood isn't a non-doctrinal church policy anymore, since God revealed through another prophet that we should stop doing it. And that was way back in 1978. Had people even started talking about race equality at that point? Well, maybe a tiny bit, but here's the deal. The reason it wasn't changed earlier is because even though God is no respecter of persons, like I said before, a lot of people in the church had old-fashioned racial attitudes back then. So if there had been a change as drastic as not discriminating against black people earlier, a bunch of people might have gotten really pissed and left. You would have had a net loss for the church if you just ripped it off like a band-aid or something, so God had to wait for just the right time, and thanks to modern prophets, we knew exactly when that time was. See how great having a living prophet is? Here's what it boils down to. God is no respecter of persons, which means that he is not and never has been a racist, because God never changes. And God communicates directly with his prophets to let us know what his never-changing will is. And sometimes God's will is to discontinue a not necessarily wrong, non-doctrinal practice put in place by earlier prophets who he had also called and communicated directly with. The bottom line is that black people can totally have the priesthood now. We even have black people in church leadership. So the priesthood is non-discriminatory. Anyone can have it. Well, except for women, but I've already talked about that. So that whole priesthood thing is the only reason people think we're racist. Well, there is one other tiny thing they might be thinking of. So the Book of Mormon, one of our central books of scripture? Well, it turns out that one of the main storylines in there is about these two groups of people that lived here in America anciently called the Nephites and the Lamanites. And pretty early on, the Lamanites went bad, so God turned their skin dark so that the Nephites would know not to marry them. But if any of the Lamanites became good, their skin turned back white again. Anyway, way later, the Lamanites killed all the Nephites and then became the American Indians we know today. So that might seem kind of racist, but there are stories like that in the Bible, so if you think that's racist, maybe you should take it up with God. Told ya, not racist.